Number 1. This took place about 6 months ago. In order for this story to make sense, I have to explain a little bit about my apartment. I live in an old house that was renovated and divided into 3 apartments, 1 basement suite, 1 on the main floor, and 1 little one in the attic. I live in the attic apartment with my boyfriend. The entrance to the attic apartment is rather difficult to find, and either my boyfriend or I often have to go out and collect our pizza from confused delivery guys because even with our instructions, they can't figure out how to get to us. In order to get to our place, you would have to squeeze through the narrow space in between the 2 cars parked in the house's driveway, stumble over some uneven stepping stones and long grass, a little tricky to navigate in the dark if you aren't used to it, open the gate, go down the path, and then to your right you would find a tall set of wooden stairs leading up to the side of the house to our attic door at the top. Now, I used to get home from work around 9:30 p.m., so it was around this time when I came home this one night, went through the gate, and was just about at the stairs when I stopped dead. There was a man sprawled out face down across the bottom of the stairs, apparently asleep or passed out. He was lying vertically and had one arm stretched up above his head like it was reaching out. It looked really creepy. His head was down so I couldn't see his face. I was instantly freaked out. I had never seen this guy in my life, and I had no idea how he had stumbled his way to our staircase in the first place. In the dark, and presumably drunk. My only logical assumption at this point was that he was passed out drunk. He didn't seem to be hurt, didn't have a scratch on him, and his clothes were perfectly clean. I could see that he was breathing, which was a plus, right? But his body was blocking the stairs, and there was no way I could get up to the apartment without risking waking him. And I just got an incredibly bad feeling at the thought of trying to walk past him. I was too scared to touch him or try waking him up. I just had that bad gut feeling in spades, so I just quietly backed away, went back to the front of the house, and phoned my boyfriend, Tim. Thankfully, he answered. I asked him if he was home, and then I told him about the guy on the steps. Tim must have thought I was joking or something. He told me there couldn't be a guy on our steps because he had just come home literally minutes before and there had been nobody there or any sign of anyone. He also hadn't heard any noises or anything from outside. From inside our apartment, we can always hear someone coming up the steps, and we can usually hear the gate shut too. So one would assume the sound of a large, muscular, drunk man stumbling through the gate, then falling face first on our steps would have made some noise. Apparently not. I insisted that there was seriously a guy sprawled out on the stairs, and I was too scared to try to go around him. After opening the door and looking out, Tim could see I was entirely correct. Not sure what else to do, Tim called the police. Just the non-emergency line, not 911, as we didn't think it warranted that. I stood in front of the house while we waited for the cops. For some reason, they ended up sending a cop car, an ambulance, and a fire truck, all with sirens blaring, even though we hadn't reported it as an emergency. The paramedics were the first on the scene, so I directed them to the side of the house where the guy was, and I came around to watch. Although he hadn't moved throughout the deafening noise of the sirens, he seemed to wake up fairly quickly when the paramedics shook him. He stood up on his own, steadily, and didn't appear to be impaired. At this point, the paramedics asked me to go back around the front, out of earshot, as they asked the man questions. When I went back to the front of the house, there was a blonde woman standing in the driveway watching the commotion. She asked me what was going on, and I explained it to her. I said I felt awkward to have caused so much drama by calling the police, but we just couldn't think of anything else to do, and we had a bad feeling about the whole thing. She immediately reassured me that I'd done the right thing, saying, "Oh no, he had to go." She then told me that she was the neighbor and the guy had been lurking around her property earlier. She said she had chased him away, but he had come back until her dad, the property owner, had come and told him to leave. So I have no idea why he was creeping around our two houses or how he wound up passed out on our steps. Either the cops or the paramedics took the guy away quietly, and we never found out anything more about the situation, but it really creeped us out. This is most likely just extreme paranoia, but I really got the feeling he was just waiting for me to get too close to him. There was something almost staged about the way he was positioned on the stairs. It gives me shivers just remembering it. Number 2. Let me preface this by saying that this story happened when I was a lot younger and less worldly wise about the creeps of the world. Had I known then what I know now, this story would have ended before it began. This story begins when I, a 16-year-old girl, got bored one day and decided to download a version of the Tinder app. After a couple of swipes, a guy's face popped up, and what intrigued me was that he did not have his name in his profile. Think M. Spark instead of Mark. Now, he didn't seem like a rapper, so I swiped right out of curiosity. We matched right away and began talking. Just run-of-the-mill conversation. What do you do for fun? Been to any parties lately? That kind of thing. After a bit of digging, it emerged that he went to the school at the bottom of my road, so we arranged to meet that weekend. At this point, I didn't even have his name, but felt too awkward to ask it after we'd been talking all this time. Saturday came, and Mark turns up about 20 minutes late. He's carrying a rose, presumably to make up for the fact that he is only around 5'2" tall, which had been cleverly omitted in the photos he posted. I'm not usually into short guys, but I humored him, and we went and sat in a park in the town center to talk. We talked for about 2 hours about everything and nothing at all, until Mark asked me if he could be so bold as to kiss me. I was flattered, but declined. He persisted, saying it was very important, until I lost my temper and asked him why. He explained to me that he suffered from sex-based migraines, and if he was deprived of sexual contact for too long, he would get an excruciating headache that could render him immobile for 48 hours. Although I was naive, I was not stupid enough to believe his nonsense, but wanted to get home quickly after this meeting had turned sour. I leaned over, gave him a quick peck on the cheek, and hurried away into the piercing parlor across the street, where the owners knew me and talked with me for an hour until I felt secure enough to get the bus home. I thought this was the end of the encounter and traveled home calmly. Me and my mother have never had a strong relationship, and I didn't want to talk to her about it, so when she asked about my day, I just brushed it off and said I had met a friend for lunch. After dinner, I went upstairs to my room and pulled out my phone. My stomach dropped. There was a Snapchat notification from MS Sparks. My username must have been on the profile I set up on Tinder. How stupid of me. I think back to it now, for I could have avoided a good many unsolicited dick pics otherwise. I gingerly opened it. It was a 10-second video of him lying on his bed at home, looking dazed and confused. The caption, "Look what you did to me." I realized that he was actually faking a migraine and filming it to send to me. I blocked the account and sat watching TV for a while. No harm done, I thought. Wrong again. From knowing where I went to school and the fact that I have an unusually spelled first name, a friend request came in from Mark a couple of days later. I declined, and he sent it again. I was a little weirded out, but he seemed to have mutual friends with me, and from his profile I could learn more about him, i.e., how to avoid him. Big mistake number 2 on my part. The messages started pouring in, starting with, "I really enjoyed today. Hope we can see each other soon," and ending with such gems as, "I need you." I laughed and blocked him again. One day, as I was getting my bus to school, a familiar face smiled at me from the bus stop. It was Mark again, this time with his friends. I wasn't suspicious. My bus stop was opposite his school, and I vaguely knew one of his friends, so I smiled, talked, and made pleasantries until my bus came. This was to be the first of many encounters with Mark, all of which I brushed off as coincidence. He lived and went to school in the same part of town as I did. It was uncommon for me to go a day without seeing someone I knew. The last encounter I had with Mark was on my way to meet a friend. The week before, I had severely twisted my knee playing netball and was struggling to walk from my bus stop to where my friend, with a car, had arranged to meet me. As I turned the corner, who should appear but Mark, smiling widely and greeting me with a wave. He asked what had happened to my leg. I told him it had been a netball injury. He asked where I was going. I told him I was meeting my friend. He asked what time I was meeting her. In about an hour. He said his house was right around the corner, and putting his hand firmly on my lower back, he offered that I could wait there with a cup of tea until my friend came. I tried to protest, saying I would be fine waiting in a cafe, but Mark insisted and half guided, half pushed me to his house. When we got in, I asked if I could use the bathroom, to which he said yes and showed me to it. I texted my friend after locking myself in there and said that a guy I vaguely knew had let me wait in his house and could she pick me up from there. I didn't tell her the whole story, as I didn't want to worry her or have her phone my mother, with whom I would have met a worse fate than with Mark. Mark then knocks on the door, asking if I was okay. I said yes, but that I'd be a couple of minutes, and he agreed to wait downstairs for me. When I let myself out of the bathroom, I walked downstairs to find Mark lying motionless on the floor of the living room kitchen. I panicked, thinking something had happened to him, and went to check his pulse. As I reached down, his hand shot out to feel my breast through my shirt, and he weakly croaked out,
"Need release."
I batted his hand away and tried to stand up to get him a glass of water.
"Need you feel me?"
His trousers, which I had not looked at until now, were unbuttoned, and he was stroking himself, eyes now open and locked on me. I freaked out. I ran up the stairs and struggled with the lock on the door, hearing his slow footsteps getting closer. Just as I was opening the door, his voice called out from the other end of the corridor.
"Could you at least clean my oven then?"
I whisked the door open and slammed it behind me, almost in tears at both the pain in my knee and the sheer weirdness of the situation. After limping a couple of roads down from his house, I rang my friend and said there was nothing to worry about, but could she please hurry? She was right around the corner at this point, and we drove off with me telling her everything in between shaky breaths. The weirdest thing about this story? A couple of days later, I ran into Mark again. He acted like nothing had happened that day, offered me some gum, and then caught a bus from my bus stop. It was almost as if he didn't remember anything from that day, and I sure as hell wish I didn't. Knock on wood, I haven't seen him around in some time, but that could be because he's gone off to university. If I never see him again, it won't be too soon. Number 3. I am a girl, and this encounter happened when I was about 16 and my best friend Jane was about 17. At this time, I had just gotten my first car and was driving us everywhere. I was still provisional and legally wasn't supposed to drive other people without an adult, so we usually drove around when my dad wasn't around in order to avoid getting caught. We had gone to Walmart, and I pulled into the driveway when we arrived back at my house. Not 30 seconds after we parked and had gotten out of the car, a truck zoomed up to the curb right behind us. I usually describe it as a meat truck, but it was more a flatbed white truck with some meat freezer thing attached to it and one big door on the back. The meat freezer portion had no official logo or design on it, just some of those cheap stick-on letters spelling some meat company along the bottom. Right after it stopped, a middle-aged white man got out of the driver's side and approached my friend and I. He put on a big smile and quickly asked if my parents were home because they were selling meat and wanted to know if they were interested in buying any. I, clueless to any potential danger, say no, they're not home. I've always been very polite and didn't want to be rude by just ignoring him and walking away. Jane, on the other hand, was obviously much more aware of what was going on than I and started quietly telling me to come on. The man then asks us if we were interested in buying any meat or if we wanted to at least look at what he has in their truck. He gestured to the large freezer and takes a step towards us. I say no thank you. He was a relatively large man, and Jane and I were both extremely skinny, as we had both been struggling with eating disorders. Jane is now grabbing my arm and trying to pull me inside as the man keeps approaching us, trying to convince us to go over to the truck. I continued to say we're not interested. It was then that I snapped out of whatever stupor I was in and realized 3 things. My street was completely empty and silent except for us. There was a second man sitting in the passenger seat of the truck looking at us. This man isn't interested in selling meat to us. Jane is now dragging me towards my front door, and I start moving quickly along with her and can hear the man loudly approaching from behind. Jane pulled out her phone and screams at him, "I'm calling the police," as I shakily try to open my door. The man stops, looks at his companion in the truck, looks back at us, hesitates, and then runs back to his truck at a dead sprint and peels out down the street. Luckily, we never saw these men or that truck again. This happened at a time when there were several human trafficking-related kidnappings in the area, and I don't doubt for a second that if Jane hadn't have been there to provide some intelligence, that I would have been taken that day. Creepy Mina here of the Worst Nightmare channel. I hope you enjoyed those 3 stories of women finding themselves in dangerous situations with deceitful men. If you have a woman's true crime or paranormal story that you would like to hear narrated on this channel, please send it to creepymina@gmail.com, or if you'd like any horror channel creator to upload the story to their channel, post it on the subreddit Willing Stories or add it to brosgrim.co. You know the drill. Please leave a comment below, give me a thumbs up, share on your favorite social networking platform. Also, you can follow me on Twitter as WorstNightmare6 for advance notice of all uploaded videos. And always remember to stay safe.